The governance under British rule. So, in this topic, we will study about the administrative changes after the 1858. Then we will study about the administration. Then we will study about the provincial administration. What were the local bodies? Then changes in the army. Then how were the public services? Then relations with the princely states and administrative policy. So we are going to study this in detail. So first, let's start with the administrative changes after 1858. So administrative changes after 1858, the revolt of 1857 gave a severe jolt to the British administration in India and made its reorganization inevitable. So the government of India's structure and policies underwent significant changes in the decades following the revolt. So after the revolt of 1857, the British government took lot of measures and they brought lot of changes into the administration. So but more important for changes in Indian economy and government was the inauguration of a new stage of colonialism in India. So what were the changes in administration? So facing a challenge to its dominant position in the world capitalism from newcomers, that is Britain began a vigorous effort to consolidate its power, its control over its existing empire and to extend it further. That is, Britain was facing a competition from a lot of Britain was facing a lot of competition from its other competitors, that is France and all those. So for that purpose, now Britain wanted to consolidate all its remaining empire. For that purpose, it introduced a lot of changes into the administration. So it was necessary that to render this British capital secure from economic and political dangers, British rule in India be clamped down even more firmly. Okay, so the British government thought that there should be a firm base of British government in India. For that purpose, it took a lot of administrative changes. So an act of parliament in 1858 transferred the power to govern from East India Company to the British Crown. That is, according to the act of parliament of 1858, the powers from East India Company was transferred to the British Parliament. So while authority over India had previously been wielded by the directors of the company and the board of control, now this power was to be exercised by the Secretary of State for India, aided by a council. So earlier there was a directors of the company and the board of control. But now, according to the 1858 Act of 1858, these powers were to be exercised by a Secretary of State for India, which was aided by a council. Okay. So under the Act of 1858, government was to be carried on as before by the Governor General, who was also given the title of Viceroy of a Crown's personal representative. Okay, that is, now the Governor General was known as a Viceroy. So the Act of 1858 provided that the Governor General would have an executive council whose members were to act as heads of different departments and as his official advisors. So the Indian Councils Act of 1861 enlarged the Governor General's Council for the purpose of making laws, in which capacity it was known as the Imperial Legislative Council. That is, the Indian Councils Act of 1861 enlarged the Governor General's Council for the purpose of making laws, and in which capacity it was known as the Imperial Legislative Council. So the Governor General's Council was later on known as Imperial Legislative Council. Okay. So what was the provincial administration? So the British had divided India for administrative convenience into provinces, three of which were Bengal, Madras and Bombay were known as presidencies. So the Bengal presidency, Madras presidency and Bombay presidencies. Okay. So the presidencies were administered by governor and his executive council of three who were appointed by the crown. So in every presidency there was a governor and his executive council of three. That means there were three members in his executive council who were appointed by the crown directly. Okay, so the provincial governments enjoyed a great deal of autonomy before 1833 when their power to pass laws was taken away and their expenditure subjected to strict central control. So after the 1833 their powers were taken away and given to the center. So the first step in the direction of separating central and provincial finances was taken in 1870 by Lord Mayo. So how are the local bodies? So financial difficulties led the government to further decentralize administration by promoting local government through municipalities and district boards. So the local bodies were first formed between 1864 and 1868, but almost in every case they consisted of nominated members and were presided over by district magistrates. Okay, so the financial difficulties led the government to further decentralize administration by promoting local self-government, okay, through municipalities and district boards. So local bodies were first formed in 1864 and 1868, but almost in every case they consisted of nominated members. There were no elected members and were presided over by district magistrates. Okay, so a step forward though a very hesitant and inadequate one was taken in 1882 by Lord Ripon's government. Lord Ripon's government in 1882 took the step for the decentralization of the power. So the result was that except in presidency cities of Calcutta, Madras and Bombay, the local bodies functioned just like departments of government and were in no way good examples of local self-government. So local bodies were there, but they had no real power. They were just functioning as the one department of government. So changes in the army. So several steps were taken to minimize the capacity of Indian soldiers to revolt. So firstly, the domination of the army by its European branch was carefully guaranteed. That is, now the army was dominated by the European branch. The number of soldiers in the number of European soldiers was also increased. So moreover, the European troops were kept in key geographical and military positions, because in 1857 revolt we have seen that the sepoys went into the revolt and revolted against the government. So the government wanted to avoid such kind of things, such kind of incidents. So that's why the European troops were kept in key geographical and military positions, and the crucial branches of the army like artillery and later in 20th century tanks and armored corps were put exclusively in European hands. That is, the authority or control of all this main branches like artillery, armored corps or the tanks, they were under the control of the European soldiers and the European officers. So the older policy of excluding Indians from officer corps was strictly maintained. So after 1858 there were no officers. Before also there were no officers, but later on also they continued the same policy, and there were no Indian officers in the British army. Later on it was open for the Indians. So the organization of Indian section of the army was based on the policy of balance and counterpoise or divide and rule, so as to prevent its chance of uniting again in an anti-British uprising. So the Indian army was actually organized on this on such lines that one caste will fire on another and the other caste will fire on another. So this was actually a divide and rule policy, that is the balance and counterpoise trick was used to keep the Indian soldiers under control, and they cannot go against the British army, against the British government, like they went into in 1857. Okay, so they actually wanted to avoid the 1857 kind of revolt. So the soldiers from Awadh, Bihar, Central India and South India were declared to be non-martial. And on other hand, Punjabis, Gurkhas and Pathans who had assisted in the suppression of the revolt were declared to be martial and were recruited in large numbers. Okay, so the Awadh, Bihar and Central India and South India, these soldiers were declared as non-martial, and the other soldiers like Punjabis, Gurkhas and Pathans, they were promoted, they were their number was increased in the army because they had been loyal during the 1857 revolt. So the communal, caste, tribal and regional loyalties were encouraged among the soldiers so that the sentiment of nationalism would not grow among them. Now, to avoid the sentiment of nationalism, communal, caste, tribal and regional loyalties were encouraged. So it was isolated from nationalist ideas by every possible means. That is, newspapers were not allowed, the journals were not allowed and the nationalist publications were prevented from reaching the soldiers. So all the literature, the nationalistic literature was prevented from reaching the soldiers. So this led to a big increase in size of Indian army. Secondly, the Indian troops were not maintained for India's defense alone. The Indian army was a chief instrument for the expansion and consolidation of British power and positions in Asia and Africa. Okay. So public services, that is civil services, this is very important. So all positions of power and responsibility in the administration were occupied by the members of the Indian civil service, who were recruited through an annual open competitive examination held in London. So there was an open competitive exam which was held in London for the civil service. So Indians also could sit in this examination. Satyendranath Tagore was a brother of Rabindranath Tagore. He was the first Indian to do so successfully in 1863. He was the first Indian civil servant. He cleared the Indian Civil Services exam. So in practice, the doors of the civil service remained barred to Indian for they suffered from numerous handicaps. Okay, so actually the doors of civil services was open for Indians, but the process was quite difficult to get into the civil services. Why? Because the competitive examination was held in far away London. If you want to appear for the competitive exam of the civil services, you will have to go to London, and it was conducted through the medium of the alien English language. So the exam was conducted into the English language, and it was based on classical Greek and Latin learning, which could be acquired only after a prolonged and costly course of studies in England. Okay, so this was very difficult for Indians, and this was also actually a measure to keep Indians away from the Indian civil services. So in addition, the maximum age for entry into the civil service was gradually reduced from 23 in 1859 to 19 in 1878. So actually the age limit was reduced from 23 to 19 in 1878. Okay. So civil services was an important aspect of the British government, which was it was actually a main string which was helping the British administration. So how were the relations with the princely states? So before 1857, they had availed themselves of every opportunity to annex princely states. The British, when they were expanding them, their kingdom, their empire, that time they grabbed every opportunity to annex the princely states. Okay, but this policy was now abandoned, and most of the Indian princes had not only remained loyal to the British but had actively aided the later in suppressing in the revolt. So during the revolt of 1857, lot of princely states they remained loyal to the Britishers, and for that purpose Britishers, and not only they stayed loyal but they also helped the Britishers to curb this revolt of 1857. So as Lord Canning, the viceroy, put it, they had acted as breakwaters in the storm. The princely states, Lord Canning, he said that the princely states has worked as a breakwaters in the storm. So their loyalty was now rewarded with the announcement that their right to adopt heirs would be respected and the integrity of their territories guaranteed against future annexion. The future annexion. Okay, that is, it's not future, it is future. It should be you. Sorry. That is guaranteed against future annexation. That is their territory will not be annexed. It was given guarantee to them. So the princes were made to acknowledge Britain as the paramount power. So that is, the princes were given the power, but they said that the Britain will be the paramount power. That is, the crown will be the paramount power. So in 1876, Queen Victoria assumed the title of Empress of India to emphasize British sovereignty over the entire Indian subcontinent. And Lord Curzon later made it clear that princes ruled their states merely as agents of the British crown. Okay. So the administrative policies of divide and rule. So the policy of divide and rule was actually adopted by the Britishers very early. So the divide and rule policy was very important for keeping the Indian subcontinent under the British rule. So the British had conquered India by taking advantage of the disunity among the Indian powers and by playing them against one another. So after 1858, they continued to follow this policy of divide and rule by turning the princes against the people. So province against province, caste against caste, group against group, and above all, Hindus against Muslims. So this was the policy which was adopted, that is divide and rule, that is make them fight against each other and we will rule. So immediately after the revolt, they repressed Muslims, confiscated their lands and property on a large scale and declared Hindus to be their favorites, because there was the unity of Hindus and Muslims in this revolt of 1857, and mainly Muslims were also participating in the revolt of 1857. So after the revolt of 1857, Britishers declared Muslims as their enemy and confiscated their lands and property on a large scale and declared Hindus to be their favorites. So after 1870, this policy was reversed and an attempt was made to turn upper class and middle class Muslims against the nationalist movement. So after 1870, when the nationalistic movement and the Indian intellectuals, they started to lead this movement, and that time they saw that if we are able to keep Muslims away from this the national movement, so it will bring a gap between the Hindus and Muslims. For that purpose, they promoted communalism and the religious enmity among Hindus and Muslims. Okay, so the Britishers adopted hostility towards the educated Indians, because educated Indians were trying to they are trying to bring change in the Indian society. So for that purpose, and a lot of educated Indians, they were taking part in the national movement. So for that purpose, the British government, they adopted a policy of hostility towards the educated Indians. So the government of India had actively encouraged modern education after 1833. The officials became actively hostile to higher education and to the educated Indians when the later began to organize a nationalist movement among the people and founded the Indian National Congress in 1885. Okay, so thus the British turned against that group of Indians who had imbibed modern Western knowledge and who stood for progress along modern lines. So there was a hostility against the educated Indians. So attitude towards the zamindars, how was the attitude of the British towards the zamindar? So the British now turned for friendship to the most reactionary group of Indians, the princes, the zamindars and the landlords. So the zamindars and landlords were now hailed as the traditional and natural leaders of Indian people. So the zamindars and landlords in return recognized that their position was closely bound up with the maintenance of British rule and became its firm supporters. So lot of zamindars, they became firm supporters of the British rule, and for that purpose there was a good friendship between the zamindars and the British Empire. Then how was the attitude toward the social reforms? So as a part of the policy of alliance with the conservative classes, the British abandoned their previous policy of helping the social reformers. Earlier, the Britishers were helping the social reformers, but during the revolt of 1857, the social reforms were also a reason by which the Orthodox people got agitated. So now the British government, they gave up the policy of social reform and they gave up the policy of helping the social reformers. So they believed that their measures of social reform, such as the abolition of custom of sati and permission to widows to remarry, had been a major cause of revolt of 1857. So the few halting steps that were taken in the direction of providing services were usually confined to urban areas, and that to the so-called civil lines or British or modern parts of the cities. Okay, so the few halting steps that were taken in the direction of providing services were usually confined to the urban area. That is, if they at all had to help the social reformers, they helped in the urban areas, and that to the so-called civil lines or British or modern parts of the cities. Then labor legislation was also very important. So the first Indian Factory Act was passed. So the first Indian Factory Act was passed, and the act dealt primarily with the problem of child labor. Okay, so what happened when the industries started established in India? That time lot of cheap labor was available for these industries, and when this cheap labor was available to these industries, that time the production was very cheap, and it was a great competition for the European market also. So that's why the European people wanted the restrictions on Indian industries, that is, they wanted the labor laws to be applied in India. So because of this pressure from Europe, the Britishers, they passed this Indian Factory Act, and this was mainly against the problem of child labor. So the second Indian Factories Act was passed in 1891, and it provided for a weekly holiday for all workers. And neither of the two acts applied to British owned tea and coffee plantations. This was only for the Indian Factory Act, but this act was not applied to the British owned tea and coffee plantations. So here the industry in British India. Then restriction on press. So this was also important. The British had introduced the printing press in India and thus initiated the development of the modern press. So the Indian press was freed of restrictions by Charles Metcalfe in 1835. But the nationalists gradually began to use the press to arouse national consciousness among the people and to sharply criticize the reactionary policies of the government. So this press started to be used against the government, the reactionary policies of the government, and the press was used for the national movement also. So this turned the officials against the Indian press, and they decided to curb its freedom. So this was attempted by passing the Vernacular Press Act in 1878, and lot of press restriction acts were passed by the government. So, but the rise of the militant Swadeshi and boycott movement after 1905 once again led to the enactment of repressive press laws in 1908 and 1910. Okay, so this was the administrative policies of the British government. So in our next lesson, we will study about the education under British, the development of education under British government. So